מה זה שם? דברים משתנים. תראה, אם נגיד מקימים ממשלה חדשה, אז שרים לא יישארו במקומם. יהיה שינוי. וכל אחד מחליט על המדיניות שלו.
הוא לא מקבל אותי, אחי. יקבל קטנה מ-9.
יש פה ריח טוב.
נקווה שהכל יהיה רוח טובה.
Basically, as Jews, we get special treatment on
אבל בוא נתקדם לים הקבוצה בבקשה.
Yeah, pretty much with we get police escort because we're Jews. I'm not sure if you guys get a police. You guys have like a guide, like a professional guide with you?
לא שיש
No,
לבוא.
I'm pretty much alone. So you can pretty much go wherever you want. You can't go into the mosque, you can't go into the rock, but you can go wherever you want freely. But being that we're Jews, we get a private VIP police escort because we're Jews. So unfortunately, that's the result of the status quo.
Okay, thanks, man.
יאללה מקום שחר בה.
Peace out.
אנחנו נמצאים על הר הבית, ורציתי לשאול מה מניע אותך להגיע לכאן?
ג'רח מזים.
מה מניע אותי להיות
כן.
כאן?
What's your motive?
זה הבית שלי. זה הבית שלי, למה אני לא אהיה פה? למה אני לא אהיה פה?
זה לא ההר שלנו, זה ההר של הקדוש ברוך הוא. הוא בחר בהר הזה לשכן את השכינה שלו, שאנחנו נעבוד עליו פה ספציפית כמו שצריך.
אתה יכול להסביר לנו מה זה שכינה?
זה הרוח העליונה. הרוח העליונה זה פשוט שהשם נתן לנו את הארץ, גם נתן לנו את המקומות הקדושים, במיוחד הר הבית. שזה פשוט לב ליבה של מדינת ישראל וארץ ישראל. ונלחמים על זכויותינו הבסיסיות שלנו במדינת ישראל ומדינה יהודית ודמוקרטית, שבעזרת השם אנחנו נזכה להרגיל את המקום הזה וגם לבנות ולהביא עוד יהודים ולעודד עוד יהודים ולעורר את הציבור שיש נושא שנקרא הר הבית שחייבים להיאבק למענו.
ולמה למעשה היהודים לא מגיעים להר הבית? בהמוניהם לפחות?
בהמוניהם, אולי מתעייפים, אין להם זמן, הם חושבים שזה אסור לכל מיני סיבות כאלה ואחרות, אבל פשוט לדעתי הם מפחדים מהפחד. יש להם תרי"ג תירוצים, תרי"ג מצוות, יש תרי"ג תירוצים למה לא לעלות להר הבית. וכל הסיבות האלה פשוט לא מוצדקות ולא לגיטימיות בכלל, לפחות בעיניי. כי ברוך השם אנחנו יודעים איפה שם בית המקדש, אנחנו יכולים לטבול במקווה בלי נעלי אור ולעלות לחכם בקדושה ובטהרה. ואנחנו יודעים איפה עומד המקדש, ואנחנו יודעים את המסורת שאנחנו כמובן מקיפים את כל ההר. אז שאנחנו נזכה לדעת את התורה ושיהיה לנו את האומץ לעבוד את הקדוש ברוך הוא, לעבוד למענו ולדעת תורת ארץ ישראל באמת. ברוך השם שאנחנו זוכים לעלות לכאן, זה לא מובן מאליו, במיוחד כשהדרום בוער, תושבי הדרום נמצא במצב לא משהו, לצערנו. ואנחנו צריכים להתפלל במקור הווי-פיי, אני תמיד אומר, המקור הווי-פיי הכי חזק בעולם, שצריכים לבקש, לדרוש מהקדוש ברוך הוא, לדרוש מממשלת ישראל, משר הביטחון נפתלי בנט, שתכסח את האויב כמו שצריך, שלא נצטרך לעשות עוד סבב ועוד סבב ועוד רקטות ועוד קדושות. אני לא יכול לסבול את הסטטוס קוו. למה לא מנצחים ברצועת עזה? כי אנחנו לא מנצחים פה מספיק בהר הבית. הר הבית הוא המפתח של גאולה, המפתח של יהדות שפיות, של שפיות בסיסית, שהמקום הכי גדול של העם היהודי.
אתה אומר שלמעשה אנחנו בתור עם ישראל איבדנו את השפיות שלנו, איבדנו את הלב שלנו בזה שאנחנו מזניחים את המקום הזה שנקרא הר הבית.
בגלל הגלות איבדנו את הכבוד הלאומי, איבדנו את הגאווה, איבדנו כל רמז כלשהו של מה זה בכלל יהדות, וברוך השם חזרנו הביתה. אבל עם ישראל עדיין לצערנו, הביא את הגלות יחד איתו לארץ ישראל. וצריך שזאב ז'בוטינסקי אמר פעם, הרבה יותר קל להוציא את היהודי מהגלות מאשר הגלות מהיהודי. זה הלב של ארץ ישראל, הלב של מדינת ישראל, וכשכולם מדברים על שלום וסיפוח וריבונות, קודם כל זה מתחיל כאן. המקום שאנחנו לצערנו, אם אשכחך ירושלים תשכח ימיני, אנחנו לצערנו שכחנו מה זה באמת אומר ירושלים בנויה.
לא לאן, אני פשוט מרגיש שהיום חסר.
מה זה אומר? אליעזר, תסביר לי מה זה יום חסר. חסר מה לעשות במהלך היום? כשאתה אומר, אני מרגיש חסר לי, מה חסר?
חסר, אני מרגיש חיסרון בחיים, שחיים לא שלמים, שיש לי חום בחיים.
ואז מה? קשה לך עם זה? אתה יכול להתגבר על זה?
לא, אני לא יכול להתגבר על זה, יום הבא אני אבוא.
הבנתי, אז אתה אומר בימים שנבצר ממך להגיע, קשה לך מאוד.
מאוד קשה.
עם העניין. אתה מרגיש ריקנות.
ריקנות, אני ריק, חיים ריקים.
אז אתה אומר...
לא יכול להחליף את זה.
אז אתה אומר למעשה שאתה בא לכאן בשביל להתמלא, יש כאן משהו שממלא אותך.
נכון. אני מרגיש קרבת אלוהים.
אבל בוא תנסה להסביר לנו הקהל, מה זה קרבת אלוהים?
אני מרגיש... איך להגיד לך? אני מרגיש שהשפעה רוחנית של בורא העולם נמצא איתי פנים בפנים. לסיבות חיצוניות אנחנו לא יכולים עוד לגשת לבית המקדש, אבל אנחנו שואפים לזה. אבל לפחות התקרבנו למקום הכי קרוב שאנחנו יכולים.
I can't remember when it was, but it wasn't so long ago. They were here and there were 2,000 people went up that day with them.
Jewish people?
Yes.
A banker and a husband?
Yeah. Did you have more questions for me, or do you want him to answer? Do you have the gentleman to answer your questions?
אז אתה התחלת לומר שהסיבה שאתה עולה להר הבית זה הבית שלך, אתה מגיע לכאן פעם בשבוע לבקר.
נכון, אז מה?
מה יש לך עוד לומר בנושא?
סליחה?
אז אתה בא לבקר. בסדר, כולם באים לבקר מדי פעם אצל ההורים שלהם, לא?
The big deal is that until Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem, the United States government did not recognize that any part of Jerusalem was any part of Israel. And this is what you have to, this is step number one. One of the things that people do not realize is how much of a Jew hater Truman was, because it's from Truman through Obama that the American government refused to recognize that Jerusalem was part of Israel. And how do we know this? I don't know how much time you have, but I'll give you just the beginning of it. Truman became president on or about April 8, 1945, when Franklin Roosevelt died. 5 weeks later, in the middle of May, the war with Europe was over. It would take 3 more months until the middle of August before the war would be over with Japan. Now, what happened in those 3 months was that Stalin and Churchill and Truman agreed to meet in Potsdam, Germany at the beginning of July of 1945. Now, Truman knew that he would be going with his Secretary of State. He knew that there would be no Vice President of the United States until January 1949, almost 4 years later. And he knew that the Constitution said that if the President, and there's no Vice President, and the Secretary of State should die, the person who becomes President of the United States, according to the Constitution, is the Secretary of the Treasury. Now, the person who was the Secretary of the Treasury at that time had been Secretary of the Treasury for over 11 years. He's the person who figured out how to get America back to work in the 1930s. He's the person who figured out how to finance the Second World War. But he had one, shall we call it, negative aspect about him. His name was Henry Morgenthau, and he was Jewish. So since it's not proper for a Jew to be president of the United States, Harry Truman, the president, fired him before he left for Potsdam, Germany, and appointed Fred Vincent, to be the Secretary of the Treasury, so that if he and the Secretary of State, a fellow named Byrne, B-Y-R-N-E, should be killed on the trip, at least a Jew would not become president of the United States. And then we can go a little bit further to 1948, May 1st, 1948, and we realize a very interesting thing. We know that on May 14th, after Ben-Gurion announced the creation of the State of Israel,
the first Prime Minister of Israel, right?
Correct. Declared the state. We know that 2 weeks earlier, Truman called a meeting of his top military people, especially the intelligence departments, and said, on May 14th, despite the fact I've asked Ben-Gurion not to declare a state, there is no question that he will declare a state. At that point in time, 7 Arab nations will invade Israel for the purpose of not allowing it to survive its creation. It turns out, fortunately, that was 1948 and not 1947 or 1949. Because in 1948, in May of 1948, let us not forget that Truman was running to be elected to be President of the United States, something he had not been before. He had been vice president, and when Roosevelt died, he became president. He was running for president 6 months later, and he understood clearly who were the 2 people he'd be running against. Dewey, who was governor of New York, and vice president candidate on the Republican side would be Warren, who was governor of California. So he wanted to get some of that Jewish vote. So that's why he recognized Israel immediately, because he felt if he waited a few days, there wouldn't be any Israel to recognize. So that's the only reason. As I say, had it been 47 of 1949, he never would have recognized Israel at all. And then he did everything imaginable to prevent any leftover military equipment from the Second World War to be sold or delivered to Israel. He did everything in his power to prevent that. He wasn't successful. That was his problem. But he did everything in his power to prevent that. And then, and not only that, in February of 1949, when all of the other nations had left with their tail between their legs trying to invade Israel, the only one that was left was Egypt. They were in the Negev in a place called the Fallujah Pocket, and the Israeli army had them totally surrounded and captured. Incidentally, the person in charge of the army, the Egyptian army at that point in time, was Colonel Nasser, who would later become president of Egypt. And it turns out at that point in time, in February of 1949, Egypt and Israel agreed they would actually enter a peace treaty, and the Egyptians would get back their military people, but not their military equipment. Truman stepped in and said there will be no peace treaty, and the Egyptians will get back their military equipment, not just their military personnel. He did everything imaginable to prevent the creation of the state, and did everything imaginable for us to have these more than 70 years of war here between our neighbors and ourselves. It's a disaster, and the person you can blame the most for is Truman. And in 1950, he's the person who refused to recognize the fact that the capital of the country was here in Jerusalem. It would take Mr. Trump some 70 years later to accept the fact that Jerusalem is not only the capital of Israel, it is very much a part of Israel, something which the American government refused to recognize all these years, from Truman all the way through Obama. Do you have any further questions?
Okay, I'm trying to understand what are you trying to say. What, the Truman...
I'm trying to just tell people that from Truman through Obama, the American government, led by its president, refused to accept that any part of Jerusalem was part of Israel. And as long as they did that, they were obviously hypocrites, because the secretaries of state, the presidents, they came here to Jerusalem. So they were hypocrites, right? Why are you in Jerusalem? Well, because this is where the government is. But Jerusalem's not part of Israel. Well, you see, there's a lot of hypocrisy.
And then we
there.
get to Trump. And what are you trying to say about Trump?
Recognized the fact that this country belongs to the Jews, and everything that the outside world wants to do to prevent the state of Israel from existing is wrong. In fact, I think the biggest proof is the fact that today the economy of Israel has probably one of the finest economies of any country in the world, much better than that of the United States, much better than that of Western Europe, and this is a fact that bothers them even more.
Yeah, how come Trump got to this conclusion that he has to recognize Jerusalem as a part of Israel, or the
Why
capital
did he have
of
to
Israel?
recognize that Jerusalem is part of Israel?
How come he get to this conclusion?
I think what you're going to find is that there is a director of traffic with a capital D. It's called the Good Lord. And the Good Lord directed that the money behind him would be people like these evangelists who appreciate the value of Israel to the Christian world, and therefore he himself, being a backer of the same thing, chose to do that. He recognized the fact that the Democrats, for some reason, turned out to be hypocrites. They voted, 95 senators voted that Jerusalem should be the capital of this country back in the 1990s. And where was Mr. Schumer? Mr. Schumer's the guy who pushed this for so many years, being the Democratic leader in the Senate. Why didn't he come here for the inauguration? It's really very sad how the Democratic Party has decided to let the socialists and the left-wingers lead the party these days. It's a disaster for America. The people aren't going to vote for that. I spent too much time, and I was served in the U.S. military in Georgia. I've learned who the real Americans are, and socialism is not what they want.
Okay.
They want to work, and they want a nice capitalistic country, and they want to make a living, and they want to enjoy life, and they're right.
Thank you.
Got Hakoan ancestry. My grandmother's grandmother was Hakoan, and I was told that by Gavriel Shaked from Vadvashem. But I was raised Christian. I was raised in New Zealand, and basically my great grandmother jumped out of the purity of Judaism into the pit of sewage that is Christianity in the 1860s. So I've done a process of teshuvah. I am actually B'nai Israel Mashomron. I'm a Shomronim. And the difference with us is we accept the 5 books of Torah, but in New Zealand I have a synagogue, which is the southernmost synagogue in the world, in the city of Dunedin. And we cater for both Shomronim and Jewish people. And I live a Torah observant life. I live according to Jewish halakha, but I'm not theoretically Jewish according to Jewish standards. So I need to convert, and I will convert one day, if that makes sense.
It says Aisha Torah in your shirt. Do you have any connection to it?
Yeah,
I'm not sure that you're not Jewish by the Torah. Okay.
No, well, I believe I probably am. Well, I choose to follow Torah, but believe me, this has been a hard journey for me. It was when I started keeping Shabbat. Everybody, in fact, I was put in a mental hospital at Purim. I was celebrating Purim, and people don't understand the Jewish ways in New Zealand.
There is a Jewish community in New Zealand?
Yes, there is a Reform community, but it's more of a social club than a Torah-observing community. The Chabad are in New Zealand, and I'm connected to all the Chabad rabbis in New Zealand.
And how come did you decide to come here to the Arbeit, Temple Mount? What does it mean?
This is the centre of the universe. This is where, in 2 years ago in 2017, I was here for 3 months. And
For the first time?
Beg your pardon?
For the first time?
No, first time was 2016 at the Hagim in 2016. And I'm an architect, and I've done a lot of study on the Solomonic and Davidic Mikdash. And I believe that the efforts to rebuild the Temple of Herodes are ill-founded. I believe that we need to be looking back at the design that Shlomo HaMelech and David HaMelech put forward, and I've done a lot of work on that since 1991 when I was at university in Auckland. I did a thesis on the architectural design of it, and my goal is for people to understand the reality of what the Mikdash is and will be, because it's going to change the world. It's everybody wins when we have a Mikdash here. And even I would say that the Muslim people, they want the house of Allah, but it's the same building. It's just the problem is everybody's looking at things from different perspectives, but we're all actually wanting the same thing. And when we do realise the reality of the Mikdash upon Habayat, wow.
Excuse me 1 second. Are you aware that the Al-Aqsa Mosque is not on the Temple Mount?
Yeah, I know.
It's quite far from it.
Yeah, we know that.
Okay.
But the only way we'll really know where the Mikdash that Shlomo HaMelech built stood is by excavating for the foundations. I mean, there's lots of debates and things about the exact location, but the foundations were dug very, very deeply. So the only way that we will know where it was is by excavating. And I believe that the dome needs to come down, because if Muhammad went to the furthest place in his night vision, he did not come to Jerusalem. He came to Aotearoa, New Zealand. So somehow something's got a little bit mixed up. So what we need to carefully do is to take the dome, take the gold roof building, carefully dismantle it and ship it over to the furthest place in the world, which is Aotearoa, New Zealand. And that will allow us to excavate and find the foundations. Because we can't build Hashem's house upon the foundations of idolatrous temples and things. So we need to strip everything back, find the foundations, and build.
You say that as an architect, right?
Yes, I'm an architect. I've studied the Solomonic Davidic House of Hashem since 1991 at Auckland University. I did a thesis. In the year 2000, I entered an international competition, and it was what design can do for the millennium. And we built a house of prayer for all nations. And so what my thesis is that it will be Yehezkiel's Mikdash or Yehezkiel's house, but I find that there's a complete meshing of all the biblical accounts, including the most important document, which I believe will be the Sefer Torah, that will be in the Aaron Habrit, which is commonly referred to now as the Qumran Temple Scroll, or 11Q Mikdash. And it's basically a Torah scroll, but it prescribes the Mikdash, including the 12 gates. But ultimately it will be rebuilt and there'll be 13 gates, because Ishmael does teshuva eventually as well.